Few sequels have ever changed the game quite like Terminator 2: Judgment Day. Released in 1991, James Cameron took the gritty sci-fi horror of the original and turned it into one of the biggest action blockbusters ever made. Arnold Schwarzenegger returned as the T-800, Linda Hamilton transformed into the unforgettable Sarah Connor, and Edward Furlong joined the franchise as young John Connor. Packed with groundbreaking visual effects, unforgettable action, and surprising heart, T2 raised the bar for Hollywood's sequels. Today, we're counting down 13 weird facts you probably didn't know about this iconic film, from behind-the-scenes secrets to incredible production stories. Let's jump into the countdown. 13. Arnold Schwarzenegger was paid millions to say very little. Arnold Schwarzenegger earned an estimated $15 million for his role in Terminator 2, an enormous salary by early 1990s Hollywood standards. What makes that figure even more incredible is how little dialogue he actually had throughout the film. Depending on how you count it, the T-800 delivers only around 700 words, meaning every line carried an astonishing price tag. Even iconic phrases like "I'll be back" and "Hasta la vista, baby" became some of the most expensive dialogue ever spoken on screen. Schwarzenegger's performance relied on his commanding presence, intimidating stare, and physical performance far more than conversation. His ability to communicate through silence became one of the character's greatest strengths. With a production budget of roughly $102 million, Arnold's paycheck represented a significant portion of the entire film's cost. And believe it or not, that wasn't the biggest challenge the production faced. 12. A legal battle nearly prevented the sequel. One of the biggest surprises about Terminator 2 is that it almost never happened. Following the success of the original film, the rights to the franchise became divided among several different owners. The complicated ownership situation created years of legal uncertainty, making it nearly impossible for James Cameron to move forward with another installment. The situation became even more complicated because Cameron had no interest in working again with executives involved in previous creative disagreements surrounding the first movie. As a result, despite growing fan demand and Arnold Schwarzenegger's skyrocketing popularity, the sequel remained stuck in development limbo. The breakthrough came when Schwarzenegger reportedly encouraged Carolco Pictures to acquire the necessary rights. The studio invested millions of dollars to resolve the ownership issues before production could even begin. Only after those agreements were finalized could Cameron and co-writer William Wisher finally begin developing the screenplay that would become Terminator 2. The 7-year gap between films wasn't caused by a lack of ideas or enthusiasm. It was largely the result of legal negotiations behind the scenes. 11. The entire production became a race against the clock. By the early 1990s, Terminator 2 had become one of the most expensive movies ever attempted. Long before James Cameron completed the script, the studio had already committed to a release date. That decision meant the writers had only about 7 weeks to finish a screenplay packed with complex time travel concepts, emotional character arcs, and massive action sequences. Once filming began, there was very little room for mistakes. Every delay affected the already demanding post-production schedule, especially with the groundbreaking visual effects that still needed to be completed. Editors Conrad Buff, Mark Goldblatt, and Richard A. Harris worked relentlessly to assemble the final cut, while laboratories rushed to produce film prints in time for distribution. Some theaters reportedly received their copies only shortly before opening day. Behind the scenes, production was a race against impossible deadlines. But despite surviving impossible deadlines, an even bigger obstacle had nearly stopped the sequel before filming even began. 10. Creating the T-1000 required technology that barely existed. The T-1000 remains one of the most unforgettable villains in Terminator 2, but James Cameron had actually imagined a liquid metal assassin years before the sequel. The problem wasn't creativity, it was technology. During production of the original Terminator, computer-generated imagery simply wasn't advanced enough to bring the idea to life, so Cameron saved it for the future. That opportunity arrived after The Abyss, where new digital effects proved that realistic morphing was finally possible. Cameron teamed up with Industrial Light and Magic and challenged the visual effects team to create a reflective, shape-shifting humanoid, unlike anything audiences had seen before. The artists developed new scanning techniques to capture Robert Patrick's movements and transform them into seamless CGI. Those digital effects were combined with Stan Winston's practical makeup, prosthetics, and mechanical props, creating transformations that still look impressive more than 3 decades later. Technology alone, however, wasn't enough. Robert Patrick committed himself to making the T-1000 feel like a machine wearing human skin. He studied predators such as sharks, eagles, and big cats to develop an emotionless, relentless presence. He even trained to sprint at full speed while breathing only through his nose, allowing him to chase his victims without showing signs of fatigue. The combination of groundbreaking visual effects, practical filmmaking, and Patrick's chilling performance created one of the most iconic movie villains ever put on screen. But groundbreaking effects weren't the film's only achievement. One actor underwent an equally incredible transformation for the role. 9. Linda Hamilton's transformation was far more than movie magic. Sarah Connor's dramatic transformation between the first and second Terminator films remains one of the most remarkable character evolutions in action movie history. The frightened waitress audiences met in 1984 had become a hardened survivor preparing for the end of the world. That change wasn't achieved through clever camera angles or costume design alone. Linda Hamilton committed herself to months of intense physical training alongside professional fitness coach Anthony Cortez and an Israeli Special Forces weapons instructor. Her routine included strength training, firearms practice, and endurance workouts designed to make every movement appear authentic. By the time cameras rolled, Hamilton looked and handled weapons like someone who had genuinely spent years preparing for humanity's final battle. The production also relied on a fascinating real-life advantage that many viewers never noticed. Linda's identical twin sister, Leslie Hamilton Garrett, helped create several of the film's most convincing visual illusions. During scenes that required 2 Sarah Connors to appear together, particularly when the T-1000 imitates her, both sisters performed simultaneously on carefully constructed duplicate sets. The clever use of twins didn't stop there. During the memorable mental hospital sequence, the security guard and his liquid metal duplicate were portrayed by twin brothers Don and Dan Stanton, allowing filmmakers to create remarkably convincing double images without relying on digital effects. While audiences often remember Terminator 2 for its revolutionary CGI, some of its smartest visual tricks were accomplished using practical filmmaking techniques and perfectly matched performers. 8. Edward Furlong grew up while the cameras were still rolling. Edward Furlong was only a young teenager when he landed the role of John Connor, but the lengthy production schedule created an unexpected challenge that no one could control. As filming progressed, Furlong naturally began going through puberty. He grew taller, his facial features matured, and perhaps most noticeably, his voice started to deepen. Normally, that wouldn't be a problem, but Terminator 2 takes place over just a few days. To preserve continuity, the filmmakers carefully rearranged the shooting schedule, filming scenes that required John's younger appearance before the physical changes became too obvious. Camera angles, blocking, and platform adjustments were then used to minimize the noticeable differences during later scenes. Post-production introduced another solution. Sound editors subtly adjusted the pitch of some of Furlong's dialogue to help maintain a more consistent voice throughout the film, preventing audiences from noticing the gradual changes that occurred during production. While John Connor was racing to prevent Judgment Day, Edward Furlong was experiencing one of the biggest milestones of adolescence, all while the cameras kept rolling. Sound editors subtly adjusted parts of his dialogue to keep his voice consistent. 7. Joe Morton's most emotional scene was inspired by real life. Miles Dyson may not appear until the middle of Terminator 2, but his role becomes one of the film's emotional turning points. His final moments, in particular, stand out because they feel remarkably authentic, and there's a powerful reason why. During production, the filmmakers were searching for the most realistic way to portray Dyson after suffering a devastating gunshot wound. Instead of relying solely on imagination, actor Joe Morton drew from one of the most painful experiences of his own life. Years earlier, Morton had survived a serious car accident that left him with a collapsed lung. Remembering how difficult it was to breathe, he demonstrated that strained, uneven breathing pattern for James Cameron, explaining that someone with Dyson's injuries would likely experience something very similar. Cameron immediately recognized the realism of the performance and reshaped the scene around Morton's personal experience. Rather than delivering a dramatic Hollywood death, Dyson struggles through every breath, making his sacrifice feel painfully believable. Dyson isn't simply the scientist whose work leads to Skynet. He becomes someone who fully understands the consequences of his inventions and willingly gives his life to stop them. His performance made Dyson's sacrifice feel remarkably authentic. Amid all the explosions, visual effects, and relentless action, it's this deeply human performance that reminds viewers Terminator 2 is driven just as much by emotion as spectacle. 6. The nuclear nightmare was designed to feel uncomfortably real. For many viewers, the film's most terrifying sequence isn't a chase scene or a battle with a Terminator. It's Sarah Connor's horrifying vision of a nuclear attack. Rather than creating a stylized science fiction explosion, James Cameron wanted the sequence to resemble the devastating reality of a nuclear blast. The production team consulted experts on nuclear warfare and studied archival footage to accurately portray the intense flash, expanding fireball, destructive shockwave, and catastrophic aftermath. The result is one of the most haunting moments in blockbuster cinema. Children vanish in an instant, playgrounds are reduced to ashes, and the city is consumed by unimaginable destruction. Even decades later, the sequence remains deeply unsettling because it feels frighteningly plausible. One of the scene's most surprising production secrets involves the mushroom cloud itself. Instead of relying entirely on miniature explosions or computer effects, the filmmakers reportedly filmed a performer wearing a specially designed costume, slowly mimicking the rising movement of a nuclear cloud. That performance was then incorporated into the final visual effect. Critics praised the sequence for portraying nuclear devastation with unusual seriousness, reinforcing that Terminator 2 wasn't simply about killer robots. It was also a warning about humanity's own destructive potential. 5. Turning the villain into the hero was the film's boldest gamble. One of the biggest reasons Terminator 2 stands out is because it completely flipped audience expectations. Instead of bringing back the T-800 as the unstoppable villain from the first movie, James Cameron made him the story's protector, a risky decision that could have easily backfired. In the original film, the Terminator was a relentless killing machine programmed to hunt Sarah Connor. In the sequel, that same model is sent back with a new mission: protect John Connor at all costs. Rather than rushing this change, the movie gradually builds trust between the two characters. As they spend more time together, John teaches the machine about human behavior, from simple slang to the importance of showing mercy. One of the biggest turning points comes when John orders the Terminator not to kill anyone. From then on, the T-800 changes the way he fights, using force only when necessary while avoiding deadly attacks whenever possible. It's a subtle shift that shows even a machine can adapt when given a different purpose. As the story unfolds, their relationship grows beyond bodyguard and target. While Sarah still sees the Terminator as a dangerous machine, John begins to see him as the dependable father figure he never had. James Cameron later called this relationship the emotional heart of the film, and that emotional bond helped set up one of the most unforgettable endings in action movie history. 4. A Simple Goodbye became one of cinema's most emotional endings. Few action movies are remembered for an emotional farewell, yet Terminator 2 delivered one of the most unforgettable endings in film history. After defeating the T-1000, the T-800 realizes that the technology inside him could eventually lead to Skynet's creation. To ensure humanity has a chance at a different future, he makes the only logical decision: he must destroy himself. The farewell is surprisingly restrained. There are no lengthy speeches or dramatic declarations. Instead, the machine calmly accepts its fate and lowers itself into the molten steel below. As the T-800 slowly disappears beneath the molten metal, he raises a single thumbs up toward John Connor. It's a quiet gesture, but it carries enormous emotional weight because the audience understands exactly where it came from. Earlier in the film, John had been teaching the Terminator about human behavior, and that simple hand signal became the machine's final way of saying goodbye. The The Terminator never suddenly becomes sentimental or delivers a heartfelt speech. He communicates using the only form of human expression he has truly learned, making the moment feel genuine rather than manufactured. By the end of the film, viewers realize they've watched an extraordinary transformation. The relentless killing machine, introduced in the original movie, has become a loyal protector, willing to sacrifice himself for humanity's future. It's an ending that continues to resonate decades later, proving that sometimes the quietest moments leave the strongest impression, even in a film filled with explosions, gunfire, and groundbreaking visual effects. 3. Deleted scenes that fans spent years hunting down. If you only saw Terminator 2 in theaters, you missed several scenes that later became fan favorites. Over the years, those deleted moments turned into must-watch extras for anyone wanting the complete story. One of the biggest surprises was Michael Biehn's return as Kyle Reese. He filmed a dream sequence in which Reese appears to Sarah Connor in her hospital room, reminding her that John remains Skynet's ultimate target and urging her to keep fighting. Although the scene strengthened the emotional connection to the first film, James Cameron ultimately removed it to maintain a tighter pace. Ironically, the scene almost wasn't filmed at all. Michael Biehn reportedly overslept on the day of shooting, leaving Linda Hamilton rehearsing while the crew waited for him to arrive. Another memorable deletion was the CPU surgery scene. Sarah and John remove the Terminator's processor and switch it from read-only mode into learning mode. The sequence also highlights their opposing views. Sarah wants to destroy the machine before it becomes another threat, while John believes it can continue learning and become something more than its programming. Many fans feel this scene gives even greater depth to the T-800's character arc, when the special edition and later DVD releases restored these deleted scenes, including Kyle Reese's cameo, the CPU sequence, and additional footage of the glitching T-1000. Fans finally got to experience material they had been hearing about for years. But the movie's story didn't end with deleted scenes. It grew into something much bigger than anyone expected. 2. Terminator 2 became much bigger than just a movie. Most movies end when the credits roll. Terminator 2 was only getting started. Instead of fading away after its theatrical run, the film expanded into one of the biggest entertainment franchises of the 1990s. One of the most memorable additions was T2 3D, Battle Across Time at Universal Studios. Directed by James Cameron himself, the attraction reunited Arnold Schwarzenegger, Linda Hamilton, Edward Furlong, and Robert Patrick for what essentially felt like a mini-sequel. The experience combined live stunt performers with 3D film effects, sending audiences straight into Skynet's future war for another showdown with the machines. Outside the parks, the franchise exploded everywhere. There were video games across nearly every major console, arcade shooters that kept players feeding quarters into the machine, comic books exploring new timelines, and novels expanding the war against Skynet in ways the movies never could. Long before cinematic universes became Hollywood's favorite trend, Terminator 2 had already built an entire world beyond the big screen. It wasn't just a movie you watched, it became one you played, collected, read, and experienced in almost every form imaginable. 1. The sequel that became a Hollywood legend. On paper, Terminator 2: Judgment Day sounded like a sequel that shouldn't have worked. James Cameron took the unstoppable villain from the first film and turned him into the hero, a bold decision that completely changed audience expectations. Instead of repeating the original story, Cameron reinvented it. Sarah Connor evolved from a terrified survivor into a fearless warrior determined to prevent the future she had seen. The T-800 transformed from humanity's greatest threat into its protector, while the story balanced spectacular action with themes of family, sacrifice, destiny, and the power to change the future. The gamble paid off in spectacular fashion. Terminator 2 became the highest-grossing film of 1991 and earned 4 Academy Awards for Best Visual Effects, Best Makeup, Best Sound, and Best Sound Effects Editing. It also received multiple Saturn Awards. Recognizing James Cameron's direction, Linda Hamilton's performance, Edward Furlong's breakout role, and the film's groundbreaking achievements in science fiction filmmaking. Its influence extended far beyond the box office. For decades, the movie became a staple of home video collections, cable television, and movie marathons. Fans still debate whether the original Terminator or Terminator 2 is the superior film, a discussion that continues more than 30 years later. In 2023, the Library of Congress selected Terminator 2: Judgment Day for preservation in the National Film Registry, recognizing its cultural, historical, and artistic significance. What began as a sequel to a modest sci-fi thriller ultimately became one of the greatest action films ever made, and a landmark that helped redefine the modern blockbuster. And that's our countdown of 13 weird facts about Terminator 2: Judgment Day. Which fact surprised you the most? Or what's your favorite scene from the movie? Let us know in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with a fellow Terminator fan. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.